All right, I'm not seeing it on the YouTube side yet. We are about 10 seconds late on YouTube usually. Hold on. And there we go. Okay, so this is me testing the live broadcast. Hey, everybody, I'm David. I'm producing this Liz Tells Frank What Happened in Tenet live. I'm only here as a producer, so if you see me again during the broadcast, it is only because something terrible has happened. Otherwise, I'll be passing it off to our lovely stars, and they'll be taking hold of it. The first thing that you're going to see, actually, is Lauren Flans. You may know her from Wild and Out, season 2 of Another Period. 2 weeks from yesterday, she'll be fully vaxxed, and she's looking forward to getting ghosted in person. So after the countdown, we'll start with an intro from Lauren Flans and then into Liz Tells Frank, What Happened in Tenet. All right, here we go. And it is time for a countdown.
Hello, virtual audience, and welcome to the world's first digital edition of Liz Tells Frank. It has been a tumultuous year of upheaval and uncertainty, and yet throughout all of this turmoil, one thing hasn't changed. Frank is still uninformed about the overwhelming majority of movies. Now, even if this is your first time experiencing Liz Tells Frank, you almost certainly know its origin story from back when it made national news. However, for any foreign guests that we may have out there watching tonight, I will briefly recap. Now, Frank was a renowned carpenter in the Marina del Rey area, specializing in providing services aboard the yachts of wealthy locals. One tragic day, whilst attempting to take a picture of a buoy that looked like it had a face on it, he tumbled over the side of the yacht he was currently working on, the SS Plot Contrivance. In a miraculous turn of events, Frank's lifeless body was picked up by a garbage scow and rushed to the hospital. Thankfully, he regained consciousness, but in what the papers deemed a reverse overboard, it was discovered that Frank had complete and total amnesia. Now, lucky to be alive, Frank attempted to return to his previous life, but the toll of his disability was too great. He lost his job as a carpenter because he couldn't remember any of his skills, and his wife and 3 children all left him. Things finally began to look up for Frank 10 years later when Dr. Liz Shannon Miller, a prominent neurosurgeon, read Frank's story in a local paper's "Hey, whatever happened to that guy?" anniversary feature. Deeply moved by his tragic story, Liz contacted Frank and asked him if he might be interested in undergoing an extremely risky and as yet untested memory restoring brain surgery that she had been covertly working on for decades. Now, the procedure was at the time purely theoretical, and Liz was very upfront with Frank that if her hypothesis was incorrect, he could very well end up a vegetable for the rest of his life. But Frank felt he had nothing to lose. As the operation was not condoned by the American Surgical Association, it was ironically performed on a yacht so as to capitalize on the much more lenient rules of international waters and maritime law. To everyone's surprise, the surgery was a resounding success. Frank's amnesia was completely cured, and he regained all of his memories in full, with one exception. For reasons that even Liz herself cannot explain, Frank was still unable to remember any of the movies he had ever seen. Not only that, from the surgery onward, even if Frank experienced a new movie, it would be completely erased from his memory moments after its conclusion. Now, this explains why, for example, if Frank happened to see a movie released in, say, summer of 2020, well after the initial accident, he would still not remember it. Even Dr. Miller admits that this particular detail is bizarre and seems rather convenient, but that's science for you. Anyway, racked with guilt over this one flaw in her otherwise groundbreaking surgery, Liz vowed to tell Frank about every movie in great detail. Frank informed her multiple times that this was unnecessary, and actually he was really just looking forward to getting back to his life and rebuilding, but Liz was insistent, and thus Liz Tells Frank was born. Now, all that's left to say is you are very much encouraged to tweet along with tonight's action using the hashtag LTFTenet, and also feel free to ask questions and make comments on YouTube. The Bellmasters will be moderating the chat and posting your questions. So Godspeed, audience members, and enjoy Liz Tells Frank. Thank you. Thank you both.
Oh, no, Lauren, it's just a treat to hear our story told so well. And I think that's
such
really
sensitivity.
It touched me greatly. I remember hearing it as a young child, and it really impacted my development. Yeah.
Ladies and gentlemen, Lauren, man, thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Lance, good Lord, I'm
Listen,
sorry.
I'm not choosy about it. You call me whatever feels right to you.
Lauren Plans, ladies and gentlemen, thank you
Have
again.
a good show. Bye,
Lauren. Oh my goodness. Yeah, Frank, hi.
Hello.
This is different.
It's experimental.
Yeah, we're thank you to everyone already for watching this, and as we figure out how this works. I mean, we've done some prepping, we've done some tests, I have run through the presentation a few times. We should be ready to go, but this is an exciting and fun way of doing Liz Tells Frank live. So hopefully, we'll see what happens. Maybe some magic, maybe some impromptu moments where I just forget what to say.
I can't wait.
Yeah, excellent. Well, we got a presentation ready for you right here, and I apologize. Normally, these PowerPoints, as you know, are very full of exciting animations, but I want to keep things simple. And a big factor in that is, initially I saw Tenet like a few times when it came out, when it was made available to me in a way I felt safe to watch it, which we'll get into. I saw it a couple of times then, and my opinion at the time was, I don't really know if I understand this movie. And then a couple of months passed, and I was like, really, when I think about it, Tenet seems pretty simple. And so I suggested we do it for Liz Tells Frank Live. And then, Frank, unfortunately, what happened was I started trying to remember everything that happened in Tenet and discovering it's a far more complicated movie than I remember it being. Somebody watching might have been like, "Oh no, it's totally fine. It's just a heist movie. No big deal." Or it's a spy movie rather. And that actually brings us to the first point I want to make here. Actually, wait. No, that does not bring me to the first point I want to make here. Frank, as you know, Tenet plays around with the concept of time and the order in which things occur in unique and interesting ways. So we're going to start things today with your final thoughts.
Oh, how exciting. Great. Yeah. This is a very nonlinear edition. I guess I'd like to start by acknowledging that I meant to look up the word Tenet on Wiktionary before doing this broadcast, but I forgot because I spent too much of the afternoon deleting things on my desktop and closing open tabs so that this broadcast would run smoothly. But I think a tenet is like a deeply held belief of I think you're maybe a group of people. And I don't know what that has to do with this movie. I did learn recently that the lead is Denzel Washington's son, I think. Yeah. That's exciting to me. he seems great, if not necessarily in this, then in some other things. And it's exciting when the second generation goes out there and does it. Kurt Russell, star of Overboard, he and Goldie Hawn had that son from The Lodge. He's doing well. That's so. I guess that's about. Those are my final thoughts.
Those are excellent final thoughts. And you, spoiler alert, you will get a chance to amend them down the line.
Oh, great! I hope that's thematically relevant or narratively relevant to the film.
Vaguely. Okay. Like most things in this presentation, it's vaguely related to Tenet. But I am going to, but for the sake of context, the really easy, quick way to understand Tenet is this. Inception is the heist movies as Tenet is the spy movies. And this is a parallel that Christopher Nolan, who I believe you might have heard wrote and directed this film, directly draws upon. So basically, the whole idea, Christopher Nolan's whole idea when he was making the film was he really wanted to do the wacky stuff he does with time, which we'll get to. But he was very interested in kind of capturing the spirit of the James Bond movies he grew up loving. However, this is a fun detail I learned from watching the behind-the-scenes making of Thingamabobber that iTunes included with my purchase of this film.
What a great company.
They're wonderful. Love you, Apple. Please give me all of your products for free. Anyways, he didn't, in order to not emulate any other spy movie, as soon as he started working on Tenet, he basically refused to watch any other spy movie, just to avoid any sense that he would be imitating previous films and kind of capture the joy and spirit he had as a young man loving James Bond movies. Which is it's something I note because when it tells you that this movie is meant to be inspired in some way by spy movies, that makes sense in that context, but when you watch it, you don't really get that vibe. Like, there's some elements of it that feel James Bondy. There's a lot of world traveling. There's a dame, etc. But it's not. It feels if you were to like go in looking for elements that were James Bondy, you would find them, but it's not necessarily an immediate comparison point. And people are allowed to disagree with me on that, but that's kind of the way I felt about it.
But so this is parallel to the way that Inception is about dreams, if you've never had a dream or know what a dream is actually like.
Yeah, it's weird. No one ever talks about how Christopher Nolan stopped dreaming for 10 years. Existing on soul like catnip, so never sent him into REM sleep. It's weird no one talks about that, but it is true. That is 100% what happened.
I'd like to see that iTunes feature.
So here are some things that Tenet is not, now that we're talking about the things Tenet is. Tenet is not a story told in reverse. And I feel like that was something I was maybe expecting going in. There are elements of it that feel that, like, there are elements of manipulating the narrative in that way, but it is not like a perfect palindrome of a movie, if that was something you were anticipating. Okay. It is not a great star vehicle for John David Washington. And I hate to say this because I really enjoy John David Washington's work. I'm not just saying that because I've seen multiple seasons of the show Ballers, but I have seen multiple seasons of both the show Ballers, and he plays pretty hard in it. I'm not going to lie to you. So
this is the first I've heard he's on Ballers.
Yeah. He was a former football player, actually. That's what he did. He's 36 years old now, and apparently instead of going immediately to acting, he played pro ball. And I do not have any stats whatsoever on his pro ball career, but I'm sure they exist. But I mean, it's the ways in which this movie works don't really serve his particular talents well. Like, he's an extraordinarily charismatic actor and incredibly physically gifted, and that part does really work for him in this role because there's a lot of crazy stuff that happens that he physically does himself. But yeah, I wanted to say, like, if you watch this movie and you're like, John David Washington doesn't feel like as big a movie star as his father, this is not him at his potential best. And I think I am excited to see where he might peak in the future. Another thing this is not is the savior of the theatrical box office. And that's more of a bullet point for later. I know it's a real sadness, that one. But yeah, we're gonna keep going. So fun story. I wrote this bullet point when I was like in my previous state of it's pretty simple movie really to break down once you get into it, and then I started doing my research and I had to add this bullet point instead. and you could say, Liz, why didn't you just delete the first bullet point? And maybe I should have. Who knows? But I felt better on a sled. In the meantime, Frank, you asked about the title of Tenet and what it means in the context of the film. And, Tenet is a deeply held belief. It has that sort of thematic meaning to it. But the real origin of it as the title of the film comes from this. This is what's known as the Seder Square. And you can read all about it on Wikipedia. It is a relatively well-known artifact, but it is essentially, I believe it dates from Roman times, and it is, you can see it's five rows and 5 columns, and it's a perfect, it's basically a perfect palindrome every which way you look. And so Tenet is, of course, the title of the film. Tenet is also the name of the secret organization that is at the heart of the film. Guess what? All the other words you see there are also going to be important. I'm trying to... Yeah, okay. I'll say them out loud, and I'll try to go back and make sure I remember to mention where they're relevant. So Seder, Arepo, Opera, and Rhodos are the other 4 words there, and they will all play a role in the rest of the film. So all good so far?
Yes.
Excellent. So we're gonna get into the cast now. I'm gonna take a quick pause, check in with the Bellmasters. Hey, Bellmasters, how you doing?
Doing good.
Hanging in
Good,
there.
excellent. Okay.
While you're paused here, Liz,
Hold
sorry,
on.
this is
Really
David.
quick
I
question.
promised I wouldn't talk.
Hi, David.
We're getting a little echo on your microphone that I've been trying to fix here in the studio, but I can't quite get anything going from it. So we just take a quick pause here to go forward. It is you. It's all I've muted everybody else in sequence, and everybody else is not contributing to it. So It is you.
Would you want me to? I can take off my AirPods and see if that works.
What I would like you to check, actually, and we can edit this out later. For everybody who's live, you get this special content. What I would actually love to check is to make sure that in your audio settings that you're using your AirPod microphones as your microphone. Because I think what might be happening is it's actually...
Oh, yes, that's a good... no, I'm getting mic default, the default is AirPods, speaker is the AirPods as well.
Okay.
Echo cancellation is checked. Maybe I should uncheck that.
No, leave that checked. That's
okay.
Important. Okay. We will power forward then. I'm not sure exactly what's happening, but that was exclusive content for This Tells Frank about Tenet, everybody. We're going to go back to where we were.
Yeah, sorry about that. I mean, does it sound different than it did in the previous test?
Yeah, it just, there was a weird, once we started going here, there was just like a weird little delay. It doesn't happen all the time. Just occasionally we'll get a little echo from you. And I don't know what's happening. Maybe you should have hired a real producer. I guess that's all I'm going to say.
Oh, huh.
No.
Well, for one thing, I would have to find everyone's doing great here. And I apologize if it gets too bad. We'll try something else. So thank you, thank you again to everyone.
Yeah, I'll do another insertion if it starts to get bad. We'll come back in.
Yeah. But again, thank you to everyone. Again, thank you to everyone watching live for helping for tolerating these little hiccups. So, but anyway, Frank. Okay, so now let's get into the cast of the film. I feel like it's usually the easiest way kind of to break down a movie sometimes is to talk about the people in it. This is with hopefully the option to have people in it. Like sometimes I feel like sometimes movies will include characters but not people. And actually now that I talk about Tenet, maybe I'm over exaggerating the amount to which they're characters. But we'll see how they go. Okay, first off, there's this guy. We've already talked a little bit about John David Washington, our star. But Frank, there's one really important detail we haven't talked about with him. Frank, would you like to take a guess at what the main character of this film's character name is?
John Tenet.
Oh my God. That would have been really good. The actual answer to the question is the protagonist. Like literally. Yes. It was literally something I only noticed because I was watching the movie with closed captioning on, and you know, on the closed captioning sometimes it would pop up with protagonist all in caps and like with a, you know, to indicate that the character was speaking off screen. And I just kept going, but wait a minute, that can't actually be the character's name. That is the stupidest thing. And I just now remembered that I'm talking crap about a Christopher Nolan movie on the internet, and this is not going to work out well for me at all. But I stand by thinking that the protagonist is a stupid character name.
Is there going to be like a big payoff to the fact that we haven't heard his name the whole movie?
Technically, it's something that there's a line of dialogue or two that technically plays into it, but not really. It's certainly nothing that would be compromised by calling him John Tenet. Like, I would not have an issue with that. Whatever. So
okay, that's my first note.
Yes, but yeah. Otherwise, that, you know, he is our hero. I'm like 90% certain the film is officially confirming that he is a CIA agent at the beginning of this movie, and then he gets swept up into a much larger story. And he is just a good guy. He, you know, yeah. Remember how I said there wasn't much in the way of characterization here? Like, you know, John David Washington again is very good, but he is just not a lot to work with here, I don't think. So I'm trying to keep it okay. I see a comment here. Maybe Bellmasters could read out loud the comment along with the bell, if that's all right.
Oh, all right.
You can try that.
Great. Sounds great. We have if his name is the protagonist, do his friends call him the?
I wish. Actually, what's really funny about the movie is how hard they work around the whole issue of like actually saying his character name. Like, Frank, when we're talking casually and I'm not doing a formal presentation to you, I don't usually say your name that often in conversation. It's, you know, usually not necessary. But, you know, at some point you do occasionally need to mention it. I don't know.
Right.
The point is that they find ways to write around. They're pretty skillful about writing around any need for any character to actually say his name, beyond occasionally somebody referring to him as the protagonist, which does actually happen.
Are there are there sequences where like he's about to write his name on a form, or he's asked to introduce himself, and then like an explosion goes off and everyone has to break? And
there's like one or two moments that,
or of like a very loud truck passes as he's saying his name out loud.
there are one or two moments that do border on that. It's pretty silly. And we have a follow comment. Yes, go ahead.
And is his father Mr. Protagonist?
That is an excellent question, and of course, yes, and that is how we should all refer to Denzel Washington going forward.
Right. He sometimes says, "Please, it's the Mr. Protagonist is my father."
Exactly. So I thought we'd have the slide up for a moment or two. This is Martin Donovan's character, who I believe is named Faye, and he shows up at the beginning to kind of help guide the protagonist through all the wackiness. He's kind of like the greeter at the door, so to speak, of the magical world of Tenet. Let's see. But then more importantly, we have this cutie right here. So this is, of course, Robert Pattinson playing the character of Neil. and Robert Pattinson probably looking alarmingly like Christopher Nolan in his styling and haircut and so forth for this film.
That is alarming.
But yes, but he's actually really good in this movie. He's very charming. He's kind of as close to comic relief as the film gets, and it's one of those things where Robert Pattinson began his career, of course, with the Twilight films. Those were his big breakout roles. And since then, I feel like, a lot of
Sam on Goblet of Fire. Just unbelievable shade. Yeah.
I apologize for Goblet of Fire. And
no, it's fine. We've non-linearly canceled the Harry Potter films.
Yeah, dude, that is true. We did do that.
Yeah.
I was gonna say, like, Goblet of Fire is like one of the few I'll unequivocally defend too. Oh well. So, anyways, Robert Pattinson, great in this movie, and he's basically the protagonist's BFF throughout the whole thing.
Just so I can imagine accurately, is he doing an American accent in this movie?
No, he's doing a British accent, but is apparently not his original London accent. His original London accent, apparently, he never likes to use in films because he feels weird about it. And he feels like he'd be pretending in real life if he did that. The more interviews and profiles you read of Robert Pattinson, the more it's like he's a very interesting person, but also like, I mean, I don't know. He seems like a really interesting person who's like living his own life, and bless him for it.
Yeah.
So we're moving on. Speaking of Goblet of Fire, we're moving on to this cutie right here. This is Clemens Posey, who is, I forget if her character has a name. Her character's role is to show up and explain how inversion works to John David Washington. And
is that a lab coat that she's wearing?
That is a lab coat because she's a scientist.
I trust her then.
Guys, quick question. Which movie did time travel better, Prisoner of Azkaban or Tenet?
Oh, Prisoner of Azkaban, 100%. For one thing, it makes sense, and for another thing, it's mostly time travel. That's my hard line on it. Frank, how did you feel about the time travel in Prisoner of Azkaban?
Whether it's closed loop or not?
Whether it's good.
Oh, yeah. I thought it was good. I think I was slightly more engaged in the novel. And Prisoner of Azkaban is probably my favorite Harry Potter movie, but I think it loses a little momentum when it goes into the time travel part, because at a certain point you're like, yeah, I'm about to see the thing that I saw before.
Yeah.
But I don't know. I can't pinpoint like why exactly that is and why I found it more engaging in the book.
That's fair. That's very fair. Maybe it's also like seeing, I don't know, first exposure to it. I'm not gonna.
Yeah, maybe I become that much more jaded between like 21 and 24 or whatever the time was between reading and watching.
Oh, good Lord. I think you were a little, I don't know, maybe we were all a little older, who knows.
September 11th it happened.
Oh yeah, that's right.
That's probably, yeah.
That's probably what it was.
Yeah.
So this cutie right here is playing a character named Priya. Her name is, and I apologize if I'm mispronouncing this, but the actress's name is Dimple Kapadia, and she is a legendary Indian actor for whom this was the first big Hollywood role, and I hope she had a good time. That's all I really have to say about this character.
Great.
Yeah, she got to do some fun stuff in this movie. We won't get to it. There's also Elizabeth Debicki, who I can't help but call this tall ass lady, because Frank, let's be really clear, this lady tall.
She's tall.
Elizabeth Debicki is 6'3", and so I really struggled to find a photo of her that a photo that would be of a suitable quality to capture just how much taller she is than John David Washington. But to this movie's credit, like the lack of good publicity photos to illustrate this fact aside, in the context of the film, they never shy away from exploring how tall she is.
Hey, I applaud that. That's great.
Yeah, absolutely. And apparently, like the costume designer, like when he was told that they cast Elizabeth Debicki, he's like, well, there's no way we're going to make her look shorter. So yeah, let's just put her in heels. Why not? she will literally have to lean over to kiss John David Washington on the cheek at one point. But why not? To be clear, for clarity's sake on this photo, she is in flats in this shot, and is still this tall.
And John David Washington is wearing like Captain Kirk big heeled boots.
Oh, probably. There looks like a little heel there. But again, and actually credit to John David Washington for being very, I'm not going to go so far as to say that theirs is a love story. We will maybe get to that a little bit. But
I'd be surprised if there wasn't a compelling central emotional relationship in a Christopher Nolan film, Liz. I haven't seen it.
Alert, but, I mean, spoiler alert for this film, by the way. Elizabeth Debicki's wife. Elizabeth Debicki is the wife of another character, and she doesn't die.
Okay,
alive,
that's progress.
The whole
That's
movie.
huge. Yeah.
It is real growth for Christopher Nolan, and I, for one, am very proud of him. So we're also going. I'm going to mention Himesh Patel because I really like him as an actor. I'm one of the people who didn't hate Yesterday on Sight. I had problems with it, but I enjoyed the film, and he's been really charming in some other roles as well. So shout out to Himesh Patel. He basically plays like a guy who helps out with some of the heisting and so forth, and some of the capering that happens. But he doesn't really I spent a lot of time digging around on Reddit for more information to see other people's theories about the film, and no one's really totally clear on how much he knows, whether or not he's and to what degree he's involved in an organization, that sort of thing. He's just there. He shows up. He helps out. There's also Aaron. Oh, we got a bell.
Jason asks, do any of the female characters ever talk to each other?
Hell no. I'm like 90% sure none of them are ever in the same scene together. There's the slightest chance that like Priya and Elizabeth Debicki's character, who's Kat, her name is Kat. There's the slightest chance there's one scene where they are technically both in the scene, but the best of my memory, there's no communication between them. So yeah. Why would women talk to each other? When we can introduce fun people like Aaron Taylor Johnson here. Look at this. That's the nice young man from Kick-Ass and Nowhere Boy, a movie I totally forgot existed. So I was doing some quick prep this afternoon.
Multiple cast members, the leads of multiple reviled Beatles films together at last.
Is Nowhere Boy a reviled film?
That was my impression, but I only read the Wikipedia article.
Yeah. These things happen. All right. Michael Caine shows up for one scene, and there's no reason for me to ever mention anything else about this except for the part where, hey, Michael Caine showed up for a scene. That's nice. He showed up. He gave some exposition to John David Washington. They had a couple of funny back and forth lines, and then he went away, never to be seen again.
It's good. It's a big get. Michael Caine won't just do anything.
And this is where it'd be really great if I just had like a poster of Jaws 3D. We love him nonetheless. He's an international treasure.
International treasure. He's his generation's Elizabeth Debicki.
Exactly. And then to round out our cast, we of course need a bad guy. And Frank, here's our bad guy. It's Kenneth Branagh.
This is red flag for me, number one.
Okay. Wait, just like Kenneth Branagh is there?
And specifically playing a villain.
Frank, would it interest you to know that he has a Russian accent?
No, stop. I'm still unpacking the trauma from that Jack Ryan movie.
Frank, I'm really sorry. I have to trigger some memories for you now. I've got a little clip. I wanted to make it explicitly clear to you. Sometimes movies, like, they'll have a bad guy, but they'll try to give him sympathetic, motivations, that sort of thing. here is, I believe, a clip from the first scene that we ever see the protagonist and Satyr. By the way, that's that character's name, Satyr. I told you all 4 words are going to come up, so that's the first one. Satyr is the name of the guy, and to understand just how evil he is, David, would you do us the courtesy of playing that first clip?
Mr. Satyr. Don't bother. Just tell me if you've slept with my wife yet. No. Not yet. How would you like to die? Old. You chose the wrong profession. There's a walled garden up the road. We're going to take you there, cut your throat. Not across in the middle like a hole. Then we take your balls and we stuff them in the cut, block the windpipe. Complex. It's very gratifying to watch a man you don't like try to pull his own balls out of his throat before he chokes. This is how you treat all your guests? We're finished.
Hey. Normal stuff. normal stuff. Anyway, Frank, are you okay? Like, because we can move on now. But if you need some time to process Russian accent, kind of, we can take the time.
No, I think this was better than I'm not going to go so far yet as to say as it's healing, but it was better than in The Sum of All Fears. I think it helped that it was contained, and John David Washington's reactions were really funny. Like, I think a Kenneth Branagh Russian accent is safer if there's somebody just like right on the brink of giving, Tim or Jim from The Office glances to the camera.
I think that response has more or less answered the question: Is Frank okay? Having watched that.
Yes.
Thank you for checking, David. Yeah.
Always, brother.
All right, we're good. I'll actually take a quick moment to ask David, and David in actual, how are my audio issues right now? Are we good still?
It's hit or miss. Thank you for the pause here. Actually, will you go in and turn off the echo cancellation? Let's see if that helps anything. I've been trying other stuff and just nothing's helping it, so we'll see if that helps. That's the last last thing to do.
All right, that is it checked off now. How do I sound?
Talk a little bit. Just let me hear this. We'll cut this out, but talk a little bit.
Pick a little, talk a little, pick a little, talk a little, pick a lot, talk a little now.
That's
sounds pretty good to me. Okay,
yeah.
Let's do that then.
Get it off.
Great. Hooray. Thank you again.
You actually fixed that 5 minutes ago, and I didn't listen to you. So there we go.
I've heard. Sometimes these things make things easier or worse. Okay. Anyway, so Frank is good. We're going to move on.
I'm just making a quick note to myself not to try to dance again on camera because this stream is not mirrored, and I started to feel seasick pretty quickly.
Oh man. I feel like the fact that we're doing this via StreamYard, which has no mirroring, actually is good preparation for understanding just how complicated some of this movie was to make.
Okay, great, good.
And so speaking of this movie, we're going to get into the plot of Tenet now. God help us all. Because as I said, I thought I had a pretty good handle on what happens in this movie. And then I started really digging into it and trying to really make sure I could answer as many questions as I possibly could. But we're gonna dig in. We're gonna give it a shot. That's my little psych up note to myself. We're gonna do this. Okay. First thing that happens in this film, the protagonist does an extraction thingy. He is on this mission inside. Wait for it, Frank. An opera house. That's word number 2. That matters to this movie.
It's just good that they've all felt earned.
Oh yeah, there's definitely nothing at all contrived whatsoever about this. Actually, the opera house is probably one of the more organic uses of the words. But he basically is on this mission. As I mentioned, he's very likely a CIA agent. I'm pretty sure that's the case. And he goes on this mission. The mission goes sideways. And he basically gets abducted by some people, and given the choice between like submitting to their torture and killing himself, and he tries to kill himself with the cyanide capsule. Unfortunately, the cyanide capsule doesn't work because it's been swapped out by the people who abducted him, who, as it turns out, are the
Classic
secret
prank.
codes classic prank. They've abducted him because this was a test. It was a test to see if his loyalty was good and pure enough to join the secret organization called Tenet, and which is very invested in the concept of inversion. And inversion, basically, whenever you hear the word inversion, think moving backwards in time. And this is where Clemence Posey's character comes in. She shows up and to basically give him a 5-minute lecture on what inversion is. If you saw the trailers, you might remember her, her voiceover saying calming things about the fact that the bullet had, oh shoot, I should remember this properly, but it was like the bullet, you're not shooting the bullet, you're catching it, and the bullet flying back into the gun. And that's just the beginning of all the crazy backseat 4Z stuff that's going to happen. But protagonist now knows about inversion, and he's also told that basically in the future they also know about inversion, and the future might be trying to screw with the past using it. In the process of joining Tenet, he gets partnered up with our boy Neil, and he gets basically handed the mission of taking out Sator, the aforementioned bad guy, who because Sator is he survived basically living in Soviet Russia, and now is dying of pancreatic cancer and wants to take the world out with him. So he basically has an evil plan to totally destroy the world by virtue of assembling something called the algorithm. And by assembling the 9 pieces of the algorithm, he will be able to reverse and cause inversion for the entire planet, thus destroying it. And there might be some stuff in here also about how the future also wants to do this mass inversion of the world as a way of preventing climate change. But let's not really dig. Yeah, it's very topical. This is one of the things that details that's dropped into like one line of dialogue, and then, but that's not what we're here for. We're here for inversion fun times. So, along the way of trying to get to Sator, though, first the protagonist has to identify a way to stop Sator. And basically what he decides is to use Sator's tall-ass wife, our girl Kat, Elizabeth Becky, to essentially basically get inside Sator's circle of influence. The way to get Sator's tall-ass wife on his side is to steal a painting that she. Oh, good Lord, this movie. She originally authenticated. She's an art appraiser. She originally authenticated this one painting as authentic. It turns out to be a giant forgery. This is, of course, like something he is blackmailing her with. Also, they have a son together, which is its own sort of emotional blackmail. But apparently, the painting thing's really important, and I guess they can't steal a son. So instead, guess what? Yes, this bullet point does explain all that. Heist time. So we get a heist, and the heist is this very complicated situation where there are these things called free ports in airports, where outside of international jurisdiction, famous rich people store lots of exciting rich people stuff, like including paintings. So in order to get this painting and get Elizabeth Becky out of control, they have to go steal this painting from this very high-tech facility. And they do so by a number of means, including blowing up an actual airplane. No, they don't blow it up. They just crash it into an airplane hangar as a distraction. And then also they throw a bunch of gold bars on the ground. It's a very, very detailed heist plan. But that's a good chunk of the movie right there. But it's not. This movie's over 2.5 hours, so there's still plenty more to go. After the heist, we got a bell.
Quick question. David asks, is that a real thing or a made up Tenet thing regarding the art story airport nonsense?
I do not know. If someone could look that up, like I wish I knew more about where rich people stored their rich stuff, because that would mean I would be as a rich person with rich stuff to hide. But yeah, it's a good question. A good question I'm open to follow up on. So yes, the protagonist. Now that the protagonist and Kat, Talas, Elizabeth Debicki are working together, she helps introduce him to Sator, which leads to that wonderful scene where we saw earlier, and they kind of start talking about working together after this fancy. There's this very intense fancy boat race that they all go on, and I don't know. It's very fancy. They're very fancy boats. There was a whole chapter in the making of documentary stuff about how exciting it was to be filming these fancy boats that can apparently go 50 miles an hour. But it's a very dramatic sequence, and it helps. The Sator falls off the boat at one point, and the protagonist saves him. So Sator's like, "Oh, okay, now we're buddies." Which is, I guess, why they agree to team up and steal some plutonium together. I guess that's how that happens. I'm not totally sure. All right, so I hear a bell. We got a comment?
Nicholas checking in. Free ports are so real and kind of insidious. Weird private city stuff. No taxes, which I totally buy.
Yep.
Yeah. I wonder if Christopher Nolan's in trouble now for revealing all the secrets of free ports and how to break into them.
Also, Lauren bets that it's real, and Nolan is so proud of his research.
I mean, I feel he also brags about talking to physicists for this film, though he does say that unlike, did I write down this full quote? I may not have. Yes, unlike Interstellar, we're not going to make the case for it being scientifically accurate. So unlike Interstellar is my favorite part of that.
We're going on a real tear here. Do you think Christopher Nolan wishes he could move backwards in time and lose 4 to 5 of these unnecessary ideas that are crammed in?
I certainly wish he did, because Brian, guess what? We're not done yet. we are barely half. In fact, quite frankly, at this point, the whole plutonium thing doesn't really work out, and then things get complicated. So I will make sure that in the comments in the comments and ancillary materials for this presentation, I include a proper link and identifying markers for the Reddit user who came up with this wonderful timeline for the film Tenet that I've just shared on the screen. It's a little complicated. You can kind of track that certain characters are going backwards and forwards in time. We are kind of, if you can see on my cursor, we're kind of around here-ish, I think, in terms of the plot. So I'm just going to I'm going to skip ahead a little bit and also do some pretty intense summarizing. But I want to make sure to note here that that looks pretty complicated. I know it could be worse. And for an example of how it could be worse, here's a timeline explaining the film Primer, which is also a movie about time travel that takes actually a similar approach in terms of the time travel mechanisms. In terms of how you have to basically, in order to travel back in time, you have to essentially invert yourself and you have to be in stasis the whole time. I'm not sure if that's totally exactly the case for Tenet, but the point is that time travel can be extraordinarily complicated, and Tenet is no exception to that rule. Because let's talk about inversion now properly, and by which I mean it's time travel, sort of. The way inversion works is it is reversing the natural entropy of an object.
Liz, this is David jumping in. I'm sorry, 1 second here. Can we go back to the beginning of this slide? I think I might have figured out the sound problem. Do you have a fan blowing on you right now?
I do. Hold on.
I think that might be what's doing it.
Oh boy, great. We figured it out.
We'll see.
It's such a far away fan. I thought it would be okay.
I saw your hair blowing in your face dramatically, and it just clicked in my brain. So let's see if this fixes it. So let's go back. All right, well, here we go.
All right. So it could have been a lot more complicated, Frank. But let's talk about inversion properly now, by which I mean, let's talk about essentially time travel, sort of. And I think that I want to make a big deal about time travel in this context because in the lead up to the promotion, in the lead up to the release of this film, a really big deal was made about the fact that it's not time travel, it's time inversion, and it's a totally different thing. You shouldn't think about it in terms of time travel. And Frank, as you know, I'm kind of a fan of time travel. So I was mentally preparing myself for it not to be a time travel thing. And of course it is. Essentially, there are key moments in the film where people go backwards in time. However, that time process doesn't require them to sit in like a little tube or whatever, the way they do in Primer. Instead, what they do is they literally can interact with the space around them. They have to wear special oxygen masks because inverted lungs can't inhale normal air, and also they move backwards. And I think the next slide will take us to that. This is Chris Nolan's approach to time travel, or at least this is why I think he was really excited to do this movie. Because he was very taken by the idea that we didn't understand the way time moves until we had cinema to explain it in the context of like you could do reverse motion and fast motion and so forth. And once we were able to see cinema like do those sorts of artificial things on screen, we were finally able to understand the concept of time moving and thus the way it could be manipulated. Does that make any sense?
Christopher Nolan would be the most unbearable person to be high with. The conversation would be intolerable.
And I'm totally stone cold sober too. This is great. I wish I were a little high, and then maybe I would understand this all better. Who knows? Anyways, so we're gonna play this clip now as a way of understanding the film's approach to inversion. And I wish I had more exciting clips. There are some sequences later in the film that feature a lot more of the reverse motion that gets featured. That is a part of illustrating the concept of inversion. In fact, I kind of, in not talking in super detail about the second half of this movie, I feel like it's almost kind of my brain mentally acknowledging the fact that the second half of this movie is pretty exciting when you know what's happening in the first half. Like there are sequences that come out in the second half of the movie that do in fact reflect back upon the first half of the movie, just not explicitly, clearly, and like it's not a symmetrical film in that respect, but it does loop back around occasionally. And to illustrate this, I wanted to show just one example of inversion. So Frank, the thing about this action sequence that you should pay attention to is look at the way that the guy with the helmet moves.
Okay.
That is what I'll say to you right now. So David, go ahead and play the clip, please. So it's hard to tell. It's hard to tell. Again, like the film hasn't been really out properly in a way where I can rip really clean clips. But as you can see, like the stunt performers in this film not only had to learn how to do many of the stunts forwards, they also had to learn how to do them literally backwards, and like are literally learning how to performing like backflips like their front flips and so forth and so on.
That's impressive.
Yeah, no, this is actually something in the making of doc that is pretty, that they show a lot of the behind the scenes footage of them like just figuring out how to do it. But they basically, all of the action sequences got all the action fights between someone who is inverted in time and thus moving backwards and thus moving, all of their actions are essentially backwards. All of those sequences were, filmed both ways, and you and I barely can keep track of what side of our head we're pointing to at any point in doing this presentation. I can't imagine what it took to actually pull off this stuff. So I want to kind of bring in some important fun trivia about this film that I think is worth mentioning. The original code word, like working title, was merry-go-round, which is honestly kind of a fun idea for a Christopher Nolan movie title, like just because they don't tend to lend themselves to any sort of whimsy whatsoever.
I agree. But it kind of makes sense that a lot of his creative process would just be stripping every idea of whimsy. So it would start in a whimsical place and then be worked down to what we see.
Yeah, I mean, Tenet is the more Nolan-y title for sure, but what Nolan gonna Nolan is all I can say. So the 747 they blew up was a real 747 that they bought from the Victorville Airplane Graveyard, which is mostly just a shout out to the Victorville Airplane Graveyard because that's a really cool thing to drive by if you've ever done the road trip from San Francisco to Las Vegas.
I just like thinking of Christopher Nolan as an airplane grave robber who is unentombing planes that have been laid to rest respectfully, so he can use them for his science experiments.
Okay, so about 1.6 million feet of IMAX footage was shot. This movie was entirely shot on IMAX. It was very important that they do that. It's apparently, it's just IMAX is really brings the viewer in more, which is the sort of thing that, of course, wouldn't matter a great deal to anyone making a movie pre-pandemic. Like, it's kind of wild to watch a lot of the making of stuff in that context and just be like, this is so much money and so much effort on this movie, and it kind of makes you wonder about why there's so much effort and so much money being spent on this movie. But there's also some plot stuff I want to mention. These are two huge spoilers for the movie, but essentially, we've talked a little bit about the character of Neil, who is the protagonist's best friend, and clearly has an awareness of who he is. And what we essentially uncover over the course of the film is that whereas we see the protagonist meet Neil for the first time near the beginning of the film, they at the end Neil reveals, oh yeah, no, actually we've known each other for a really long time. The exact line is, "This is the end of a beautiful friendship." It's very Casablanca. What we learn at the end is that the protagonist recruited Robert Pattinson to the Tenet organization. In the third act of the film, Neil dies to save the protagonist, which is very dramatic and exciting. And but we only figure that out because on Neil's backpack there is a little token. It's like a little brass ring that's tied to the backpack. I apologize, by the way. I put spoiler alert at the beginning of this presentation, but that is of course a massive spoiler for the film. But anyways, we see Robert Pattinson's character has this little totem on his backpack. We see that the whole time. And then, but it's only near the end where the protagonist realizes that the person who dove in front of a bullet for him during like the big climatic fight, which ends up stopping, preventing the algorithm from taking over the world, or destroying the world rather. The guy who stepped in front of a bullet to stop him was Neil the whole time. He just had to go back in time first, and he hasn't done that yet. There's a lot of like, oh, well, I haven't traveled back in time to do this thing yet, but I'll do it in the future. Don't worry about it in terms of closing the time loops. It's a weird movie, Frank.
Classic Bill and Ted move.
It's a lot of Bill and Ted. It's Bill and Ted, but it feels for some reason less structured. It's odd. And then also, by the way, the protagonist is apparently the founder of the whole Tenet organization that he got recruited to in the beginning, which is just a wild detail that gets dropped in at the end. and would be very exciting for a film that was meant to be part of a larger universe as opposed to a standalone original blockbuster that will never likely have a sequel made to it. It's a really fascinating detail, but it's dropped so subtly that it really doesn't land with a huge amount of impact. And also, it's just like, I mean, if we were gonna, maybe this is my Marvel broken brain, but if we're never going to revisit this world, then why do I care? I don't know. That's just kind of where I land. So another thing I want to make sure you knew about Frank is that we talked about how there's a little, like, there's at least an emotional connection between Kat and the protagonist. Like he's invested in not seeing her die anyway. And we've also talked about how the protagonist's best friend Neil is always they're good old pals, and we only see the end / beginning of their relationship, but we're told that there's more to come, at least from the protagonist's point of view. There's 700 to 800 stories from it about Tenet on the fan fiction archive and Archive of One's Own. And the Archive of One's Own does a beautiful job of breaking down all the various relationships spotlighted in these stories. So don't worry, Frank. The fandom is what it is. Fandom will always deliver. The vast majority of the stories are about Neil and the protagonist having sex. And the rest and most of the rest are just about friendship. Oh my gosh, we got a lot of comments.
Just a little bit of Corinne says, "Can we talk about the sad death of the stand-up bass in the first action sequence?"
Oh no!
Speaking of death,
this is in the opera sequence.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. I mean, it deserved better. I mean, honestly, the thing about these movies is, like, Christopher Nolan blew up a 747 for this one. Like, does he care that much about one instrument? Probably not. I mean, hopefully it wasn't like a real one. Probably, it actually probably was. I don't think he would really care that much.
The only James Bond movie I can think of where there's a scene in an opera house is The Living Daylights, which also has a sequence where Timothy Dalton and Miriam Diabo ride an upright bass or maybe a cello, like a sled, through the Alps. So I feel like by shooting a similar instrument to death in the opera house sequence, that's Christopher Nolan saying, "Hey, this is a Nolan spy movie. This isn't gonna be the James Bond writing a upright bass hijinks you've expected."
I'm going to take this moment right now, by the way, to really quickly refocus on two things that I forgot to mention, which is specifically where the last two names from the Seder Square come from. One is that Arepo is the name of the forger who gave Kat the faked painting that led her to be, under Seder's command this whole time. And oh shoot, I'm blanking on the actual word, but whatever that last word is, it's the name of the security company at the free port where that ends up getting robbed by the protagonist and his pals. So that's checked off the list. Anyways, I've not read any Tenet fan fiction, for the record, but I am glad that so much of it exists and so much of it is about the real love story of the film, frankly.
I have to imagine that some of the fan fiction involves sex sequences where one person is moving forward through time and their partner is moving backwards through time.
I hope so.
Right?
You would expect so, but now I'm just kind of mentally contemplating what that would require, and that feels like a lot of work.
Yeah.
I mean,
but we know those stunt people were up for it.
Yeah. Oh God, the stunt people would have a field day. Oh man, maybe now I need to read some Tenet fan fiction. This is a new interest of mine that I never really thought I'd ever have. So Frank, we've talked a lot about the plot of the movie, and I've told you pretty much like I would say a good 75% of everything that happens in it. I've skimmed over a few things. For that I apologize, but also this presentation is running incredibly long, and we have to get to the bigger meta aspect of Tenet, and really honestly what Tenet will be remembered for. Tenet, of course, if the world had remained as it should be, you and I might be talking about Tenet in a lovely North Hollywood gymnasium with all of our friends and family surrounding us. Instead, we are coming out of this, theoretically, knock on wood, coming out of a pandemic, and Tenet was scheduled originally to premiere on the date you see on the slide right here, July 17th, 2020. That is apparently a lucky date for Christopher Nolan. And boy, howdy, did they really want that movie to come out in theaters this last summer. And boy, howdy, that didn't really work out for them that great. So a quick history, a quick rundown. As we mentioned, the original premiere date was supposed to be July 17th. Again, a lucky day for Christopher Nolan, I guess, in terms of release dates. Then it got bumped to July 31st, and it got bumped to July 31st like a week before the 17th. And I think most of us at the time, especially in the journalism world, who were getting these updates and being like, but no one should go to see a movie in theaters right now. This is a bad idea. Like, flat out, there's a pandemic happening. It is not safe to be in a movie. It's not safe to be in a movie theater right now. It doesn't matter if you push the movie 2 weeks. The pandemic is not going away in 2 weeks. But bless their heart, they thought it might, because then they moved it to August 12th. And again, like 2 weeks beforehand. And it was just an ongoing situation of, they really wanted to believe that it would be possible to safely see this movie, or safely release this movie in theaters around the world without, like it wasn't a pandemic year. So then eventually it did come out in theaters, as you know. It was released on August 26th internationally, which was actually really funny to see, because if you go back through, I'm sure if you go through Rotten Tomatoes and you look up all the major outlets, all of their primary reviews will likely have been written by freelancers who happen to live in foreign countries that were able to safely see the movie before American audiences. I know that the site I write for, I believe our review is written by someone in Norway. So lucky break for freelancers in that case. Frank, I feel like were you about to say something?
Oh, I was just so charmed by this Norwegian freelancer getting their big break.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
I think I do not believe Collider was alone in that. I think there were a number of publications that had to dig into their freelance pools accordingly. It was released on the 3rd in America on a kind of a limited release schedule. I believe that a number of critics were given the opportunity to like see it like by themselves in a booked out theater. So they got the theatrical experience to some degree, but of course, I don't even know if, like, beyond vaccines, I don't know if too much has changed since then. It's just, I don't know. I think people have gotten more comfortable with certain ideas or whatever, or, it feels like a slightly safer thing to see a movie now than it did back last August or September. I don't know. Am I weird in saying that, Frank?
I don't know. That sounds kind of right. I mean, I don't feel safe going to see a movie, but I can imagine someday seeing a movie. Yeah.
Are you going to?
I feel like there's also more There's like the outdoor theater is seen as more robust. I would definitely see this outside.
Oh yeah. I mean, I honestly was a little sad it didn't time out, so that because Tenet did come back into theaters briefly this spring. And unfortunately, my vaccination schedule didn't time out with seeing it before giving you this presentation. Also, it's now no longer in theaters. In fact, as we speak right now, it has been on HBO Max for a total of 1 hour and 10 minutes. By the way, we've been talking for a while. But there's a lot of movie to get through. Anyways, the point is that American audiences were technically able to see this movie as of last September, but I personally did not, and I know a lot of other people didn't until the VOD Blu-ray release, which on December 15th. And it's kind of fascinating to think about this rollout, just in terms of what it's meant in terms of the conversation around this movie. I work for a site where we put a lot of time and energy into writing coverage that is meant to explain the ending and break down certain key aspects and what was up with that weird thing that one guy did in that one scene. And all of it's tailored to people who've seen the movie. So, it was really, weird to try to come up with coverage that would work for people who had seen the movie, but would also would theoretically be able to play several months later when the movie actually got seen by people. Because really, today feels like almost opening day for this film. It feels like this is going to be, it's now available streaming for anyone who wants to watch it with an HBO Max subscription. And that's actually a pretty large number of people, thanks to the pre-existing HBO customer base and HBO Max's own growing numbers. So congratulations. Happy birthday, Tenet. It's your birthday. I don't know. Maybe. It's not July 17th. That's for damn sure. Before we move on, Frank, I just want to check in with you. You good? Do you have any questions?
Oh yeah, this is just it's just become like the sad part of the episode. But sometimes that's what they're like. They're a little bittersweet. I feel like that the pushing back 2 weeks and 2 weeks again was very hard for me. It really felt like reality was building up to a breakup with Warner Brothers and Christopher Nolan, but Christopher Nolan and Warner Brothers kept begging for more time, and reality was like, oh, okay. But we all could see where it was going.
It was like Christopher Nolan got a lot of shit, and honestly, I think pretty deservedly so, for not coming up with some sort of hybrid solution that would ultimately be what Warner Media took as their release strategy for the following year, which is to actually let the audiences that don't feel comfortable seeing the movie in the theater watch it at home online, and even if this is where my joke at the beginning about this movie did not save the theatrical box office comes in, because this movie, I believe, came in 13th in the box office in 2020, which isn't too bad, but it's like it is not with a large amount of money, and I should have written that amount of money down. I apologize for not having that handy. But it really was the thing that is unfair to Tenet as a movie is that it became kind of the symbol of everything that was going on at the time, and it was kind of like not taking the pandemic seriously was like trying to release Tenet in theaters during the pandemic. It attracted a lot of undue attention, but also it attracted a lot of ridiculous arguments from the other side. And so we're gonna move on to this last clip of the presentation, which I think is an incredibly important historical document. I want this in museums. I want students to be studying this video in 30 years, and as just an example of writing long, complicated theses about what it meant to watch this in the summer of 2020. So David, if you would please.
How did that happen? I'm wearing a mask. Here we are. Back to the movies. Back in a movie theater, everybody. I loved it.
Oh, Tom.
It's just what Tom. Tom Tom Cruise, we now have at least confirmation, and there have been editorials written on this topic about whether or not Tom Cruise has actually ever seen a movie. So now we have video documentation of the fact that he was at least sitting in a theater when the movie began and when it ended. What he did in that time period in between is anyone's guess, but it's a safe bet that he at least saw like a good 20 minutes of the movie. But yeah, I mean, I think it's just basically it's like I said, it's a fascinating document of where we were at that time, and how Tom Cruise it feels like Tom Cruise thinks he's making this big, bold, brave statement about how he is going back to the movies. He's going to save the theaters, and if it means he has to go out with the actual people in the world himself, in a mask and everything, and you know, points to him at least for wearing a mask. To be honest,
I feel bad anytime a camera is turned on actual real life Tom Cruise.
Okay.
When he doesn't have a script and it won't be edited later, it feels exploitative to me.
Okay, we're
Sorry, super quick. Jason asked, "Are Edge of Tomorrow and Tenet part of a shared universe?"
Oh, that's a wonderful question. God, no. Oh yeah, this is why time travel is so much fun. And also so maddening to talk about. Is that they're completely different time travel mechanics. Edge of Tomorrow is a time loop, whereas Tenet is more. I mean, technically, Tenet is a time loop, but it's a weird closed time loop, and you don't see all the ends of it. I guess, and things don't change. It's a relatively permanent time loop, and whereas Edge of Tomorrow, the whole point is that he can change things as he goes. So I think that's the best answer I can come up with to that question. But also, just I want it to be the same. I want it to be the same universe, except for the part where, in that case, does Tom Cruise as a celebrity exist in the Edge of Tomorrow universe? And then went to go see this movie, and the character played by Tom Cruise can watch it on YouTube and be like, what the hell is that guy doing? Why are you going to see a movie during a pandemic? That's a very silly thing.
Right, especially because Tom Cruise at the beginning of Edge of Tomorrow works in PR, right? Like, that's a Tom Cruise who would be very attuned to the optics of this.
Oh man, I wish I could remember his character name. It'd be great if I could drop that information in here, but it is sadly not on the tip of my tongue. So we're almost done, Frank, and I know this has gone really long, but there's a lot of movie to cover here, and I am going to share with you one snippet of how I do feel Tenet changed cinema, which is, while Christopher Nolan did insist on a theatrical rollout for the film, and to whose benefit ultimately it's not really clear, they did try some unconventional ways of spreading the word about this film. So what's next is, this is a screenshot from the night of a trailer premiere in Fortnite. And I took this shot myself. I literally learned how to use Twitch to go to Fortnite and watch this trailer premiere. And when you see the static image of like the staff on fire, literally as I watched the trailer, these figures in front of me were animated and jumping up and down, and in excitement over getting to see the trailer for Tenet. In some ways, the pandemic has made us a lot better at figuring out ways to bring pop culture to the masses via the magic of technology. In other ways, it leads to this, so that's something I just wanted to quickly touch on, because I also want to make mention that I had a brilliant plan, and I had this cause all last year, aside from other causes like let's raise money for for food banks, and let's stay inside and not get other people killed. Aside from that, I had one real cause, and I really felt like this could have solved a lot of problems for not just the film Tenet, but another struggling company from last year. I just thought, why couldn't they release Tenet on Quibi? And let us watch Tenet the way that Christopher Nolan did not want us to watch it, but didn't have like a ton of other options. And also Quibi would still be here. We would watch it. We would watch. We could. Thanks to the magic of Quibi, we could watch the movie in 10-minute chunks on our phones. Maybe their exciting technology could have allowed us to twist. If you turn the camera horizontal versus vertical, it would have changed the direction of time. Who knows? Tenet could have saved Quibi. Is my point. I could have been the Christopher Nolan of Quibi. Who knows? It's a real shame that my stupid Twitter ideas don't make it to the people who really need to hear them.
It was a really good idea.
Thank you, Frank. I really appreciate your support on this matter. So unfortunately, Tenet and Quibi didn't happen. Instead, we got what we got. And, it's a fun movie to unpack. I'm not shocked that the Reddit subgroup for the film is incredibly active still, and lots of people are commenting on it. If this happens to get shared on the on that subreddit, like, thank you for listening this far, and love you guys. You guys are great. You guys have all the theories, and you have a lot of fun talking about them. You seem like a cool group. Please don't get mad at me for saying mean things about Christopher Nolan. But we're gonna kind of get into the. I think I basically kind of said this already, but really digging into Tenet in this era right now and seeing just how much money was spent and how much effort was put into crafting Christopher Nolan's vision, and just what kind of impact it ended up making on pop culture. It's almost like it's the sort of thing where if you thought about it long enough, it might lead to something resembling an existential crisis. I don't know. And that's kind of where I want to lead us to your final thoughts for real, Frank.
Yeah, here we've come back to this moment.
Yeah.
I do feel you've made clear to me that the movie is an elaborate and intricately constructed puzzle box.
Yes.
As we were writing, I was just making a series of observations of like the many layers on which this is working. For example, you explained that the character Sator is from Soviet Russia.
Yeah.
And the phrase Soviet Russia started making me think about Yakov Smirnov. And then I thought about how all of his jokes, the punchlines are like, in Soviet Russia, shoes wear you. And I was like, Yakov Smirnov's jokes are built around inversion. That has to be intentional. Also, I was thinking about how Christopher Nolan swore off watching any other spy movies in this time, but did he only watch other Elizabeth Debicki movies? Because as you were describing what was going on with her character, it was just like lifted plot points. It was like a mashup of other Elizabeth Debicki movies, and she's only been in like 4 movies. It's like she's married to a bad guy like in The Night Manager. They have a son. There's a heist like in Widows. There's a painting-based art crime like in The Burnt Orange Heresy. That also has to mean something.
It does. I will note quickly that apparently the way Elizabeth Debicki got cast in this movie is that Emma Thomas, Christopher Nolan's producing partner, saw her in Widows and basically told Christopher Nolan to watch it, saying, "Hey, this is the woman who should play Kat." And Christopher Nolan saw it and was like, "She's good, but she's too American. She'll never work." And then somebody had to inform him, "No, she is actually she's from Australia. She'll be fine."
It's a credit to her dialect work.
It is. She's very good.
Especially from Christopher Nolan, a man who might be faking his accent.
The mystery of Christopher Nolan. I want Christopher Nolan's next movie to just be like him alone in his apartment. He can still use an IMAX camera, but it can be. He has to shoot it. He can't have any cast or budget otherwise, and it's just him explaining his accent to us and why he has one and why his brother does not.
Oh, here's another important question.
Sure.
I can't remember where we are with the technology, what's future tech and what's the tech we have right now. When you shoot with an IMAX camera, can you record sync sound yet? Or is it still making too much noise so everybody has to dub their lines later?
Oh, gosh, I wish I wish I knew the answer to that question. I know that if he's still on, Lawrence was saying, our good pal Lawrence was potentially watching today. If Lawrence has a comment on that question, I think he might know, because Lawrence may or may not know a little bit about sound work in the motion picture business. So let's keep going and hope that,
because it is impressive to me if everyone's dubbing their lines this entire movie for its entire runtime. But also that will mean that whatever Kenneth Branagh's Russian accent is, that's when he had like all the time in the world to work on in the post-production studio.
Okay. Well, I will tell you this, that on set in a couple of scenes of the film, he does actually have to speak Russian in a Russian accent backwards, and the documentary showed the phonetic pronunciation guide he created. Like it's literally a cue card with all of his dialogue written in a Russian accent backwards, that he then apparently performed as if he was moving forward. This movie is really complicated.
But it really sounds grueling for everyone involved.
Wow. Oh, holy crap. Oh, damn. Okay, well, it looks like Liz Shannon Miller has commented. Liz, this is you from the future, traveling back in time in the temporal pincher movement to comment on my own show. Whoa.
Oh, my God. Liz from the future.
Wow.
Do you have any additional comments, or you just wanted to blow my mind a little bit? Because I could use some stock tips, or at least we could figure out the IMAX question. I'm guessing that they had some degree of sync sound capability, because if I don't see the reason why Kenneth Branagh would have his little cue card. Oh, just imagine. Great.
Well, you're a bit of a prankster, I guess, in the future. You're just messing around.
This feels like the kind of whimsy that I assume the film Tenet was stripped of.
Yeah. It's certainly not last minute, this film. It has been really fun talking to you about it, though, Frank. So do you have any further final thoughts?
Yeah, very just last things. It really does feel tragic and ironic to me that, because I love cinema, I love going to see movies in the theater, even though I'm afraid to do it right now. I've watched so many fewer movies this last year than at any other point in my life, because it's just not the same for me watching them at home. And that's been a real deprivation. So I was so sympathetic with Christopher Nolan, like really being like, no, you have to see this in the theater. I felt the same way about Denis Villeneuve being like, Dune has to be released in the theater. But Dune, like, I can imagine that's going to have like a lot of spectacular space vistas that make sense to see on the big screen. What I realized watching this, it was the moment when you put up that diagram of like tracking the timeline of this movie, and the point where you said, this is where we are right now in the story, and it was still just so early in the story. I was like, oh my God, how long is this thing going on? And then I realized, wait, the ideal version of this movie would be made for streaming. But when you watched it and you had that thought, like, how far am I in this movie? How much longer is this movie going to be? And you pulled up the time counter, it would sometimes be going backwards when the characters were going back in time, like that diagram. That would have been amazing. That's the ideal format for this kind of film.
Oh God, sorry.
No, that's it.
I totally see what you're saying. And like, when you talk about like any sort of level of creative innovation that could have been done in terms of the platforming of the film, there really are some fabulous possibilities. And, now audiences are going to get to see it at home safely. So hopefully they get excited for it. Hopefully they enjoy it. I do want to say, like, it might be a more fun movie to break down than it is to watch, but there are some really cool visual moments in it. I don't want to we didn't really get to dig into like some of the big spectacle moments, including basically the third act has this like pretty intense pretty intense battle sequence that plot-wise is just kind of like it's all like leading up to the dealing with the not the red herrings, the MacGuffins that have led us this far. But I mean, there is some really cool stuff that I wish I could have seen in the theater. And maybe one day I will get to, but probably not anytime soon, unfortunately.
Is any of it as good as that in Inception when Joseph Gordon-Levitt is doing the kind of like out of gravity spinny fight?
No, the out of gravity spinny fight still wins. I think honestly, like the inverted fights are really good. But it takes a while to figure out what's happening, quite honestly. It's why I like in the clip, Alicia, I made sure to mention to you, pay attention to what that guy's doing, because it might just read as he's doing something kind of weird.
Right, right.
And these are all the sorts of things that we would have spent a lot of time breaking down if the movie if it come out in a normal year. But unfortunately, that was not Tenet's fate. And that's not any of our fates. But I am really happy to say that I feel like I have told you at least a lot about what happened in Tenet.
Yeah,
Frank, do you feel
it was tremendous? Yeah, a Herculean effort.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I feel like this could have gone longer, but it's already gone on pretty long. So with that, I think it's time to say the end. So thank you so much to everyone who is watching right now. Huge thanks to David Net for producing. This would not have happened without him. He has been rocking the tech aspects of the show this whole time and doing a fantastic job. So thank you so much. Lauren Plans, again, wonderful introduction. Thank you so much. Lauren. Yes, thank you. And Lauren has a wonderful podcast about coming out stories for queer people called Coming Out with Lauren and Nicole. You can find it on pretty much everywhere at Coming Out Pod on Twitter and Instagram and whatnot. I think I did that right in terms of plugging. Our wonderful thanks to our wonderful bell masters, Jeff and Laurel. You guys did an amazing job. Great bell work. Thank you to everyone who's watching live right now. In the way my screen's set up, I can see we had 120 comments, and I'm sorry we didn't get to all of them. And hopefully most of them were pretty tolerant of the small tech issues that we had. Frank, thank you so much for doing this. I am so pleased to be back telling you about things, because it's something we've been doing for over 15 years now, and it still hasn't gotten old for me anyway.
Neither for me, Liz. Thank you once again for telling me what happened in something so important.
It is something I've gotten at least halfway decent at. So again, that's the end of this show. We may be back in the future doing this again. Who knows? It might even be shorter, or it might even be longer. Time is a flat circle, and sometimes you loop back around and you just do the same thing over again. So love to everyone. Stay safe out there. Wear a mask and take care.
Woohoo!
Yay.
Woo!